I'm Doris Wise-Montrose, and I'm president of Children of Jewish Holocaust Survivors. I thank you all for coming. There's lots of new faces here, and I appreciate that. I thank David Ivry for coming from the community of Shomron in Judea and Samaria from the country of Israel. And I'm going to turn the evening over to Steve Goldberg, who is going to talk about the situation, introduce David, and run the program. Thank you very much.
First of all, I want to thank Doris for having the courage to host David. It's not going to come as a galloping surprise to anybody here that many of the establishment Jewish organizations are afraid to have anybody who represents the settlers speaking. Doris is not afraid. She's brought David. This is the most timely of topics right now. We all know that the settlers are the heart and soul of the state of Israel. They're the front line. They are the people who are facing off against the Palestinian Arabs. They are demonized by some in their own country. They're demonized by people in this country. Obama and Hillary Clinton and others have taken a stand that not only are the Jews not supposed to be able to live in new communities in Judea and Samaria, they're not even allowed to have natural growth, which is building another bedroom or adding a kitchen or building a kindergarten. David Ivry, our speaker, is the representative from the Shomron. He's part of the community of Kfar Tepuach. He was born in New York. He moved to Israel when he was a child with his parents. He's married. He now has 8 children of his own. And he and others like him are on the front lines. They've put their whole lives on the line for Jewish people, and they represent all of us. They've put everything they have. He's now here to talk about the situation they're in and why it's important for us here in the United States to do whatever we can to support the Jews who are courageous enough to live in those communities in Judea and Samaria. And with that, I introduce David Ivry, who will speak for a while, then we'll have some questions and answers.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you to Doris, the children of the Jewish Holocaust survivors in Los Angeles, for inviting me to speak here. Working to ensure that never again remains more than a mere slogan. Very important, very relevant. Very relevant to the issues we're going to speak about this evening. I don't know if how many of you are familiar. I'd like to tell you to quote a statement that I heard a few days ago from made by Stanley Fischer. Are you familiar with the name Stanley Fischer? Well, Stanley Fischer is the president of the Israel National Bank, the Bank of the State of Israel. And a few days ago, he was asked to make a statement. They said, Mr. Fisher, please tell us in one word, can you give us in one word your feelings on the situation in the state of Israel? So he said one word. What word can you think of? He says, Tov. Tov. One word, good. He said that the situation is good. The situation in Israel is good. Beautiful. Then they asked him again, they said, now can you give us a statement on the situation in the state of Israel in 2 words? And he said, Lo tov. Lo tov. Not good. 1 word, tov. 2 words, lo tov. The fact is that statement is so truthful. It's so pashut, it's so simple, it's so emet. That's the situation in Israel. Tov, velo tov. Emet tov. The situation in Israel is very good. The situation of the Jewish people is incredibly greater than the situation of the Jewish people 100 years ago, and 200 years ago, and 300 years ago, and 500 years ago. Who would have believed 100 years ago that today we would have our own country, our own army, our own police force, that people would pay in the supermarket in shekels. They would pay with Jewish money. And a Jewish policeman would give them a Jewish ticket if they went through a Jewish red light. That's Tov, Baruch Hashem. That's incredible. And I could go on and on and on. It's Tov. When you are standing on the land of Israel, on our historical homeland, and you look above and you see a Jewish Air Force jet flying over, guarding you, that's an incredible feeling. The children of the Jewish Holocaust survivors can understand and appreciate the greatness of the Jewish nation having our own army and our own Air Force and our own borders. But there are a lot of things in between that are not so good. So when on Yom Ha'atzmaut we go to the synagogue and we say Hallel, we thank Hashem for bringing us back to the land of Israel, for regathering us from the diaspora, from the nations of the world. When I go to the synagogue in my town, and I'll tell you more about my town, I live in a town called Kfar Tapuach, and I go to a synagogue in Kfar Tapuach called the Central Synagogue, the Kibbutz Galuyot. In the synagogue that I go to, there are Jews from every different background, from every different area in the world. There are Yemenite Jews, and there are Polish Jews, and Russian Jews, and Peruvian Jews, and Ethiopian Jews, and American Jews. And we all gather together, and we pray to Hashem. So when we go to on Yom Ha'atzmaut and we say Tfilah Hodaya, Tfilah Hallel, we thank Hashem for all of this good, for the Tov. But on the way there are things that are not so good. We have not yet reached the understanding of the independence that we've reached. In the Bible, in the Torah, there's Parashat HaMeraglim. There's the story of the spies. When the children of Israel were in the desert, and Moses sent the spies to check, to tour out the land, and to see if the land is, if the children of Israel could conquer the land of Israel. The spies came back and they reported there was one spy for each one of the tribes. The 12 tribes of Israel, there were 12 spies. And 10 of the 12 spies spoke badly of the land of Israel. One of the things that they said, we entered the land and we saw that in the land of Israel there were giants. Anakim. So one of the things that the spies, the Meraglim, said when they spoke badly of the land of Israel, they said, when we entered the land of Israel, we saw that there were giants. There were Anakim. And when we saw the Anakim, V'ha'inu be'enenu kechagavim. When we saw how large they were, how great they were, we saw ourselves as grasshoppers, so small. They didn't say that the giants looked at us and the giants saw us as grasshoppers. They said when we saw them, we saw ourselves as grasshoppers. We saw ourselves so small. And today too, we have not grasped the greatness of the independence, of having our own country. And unfortunately, we still look out. Today I met with concerned Jewish leadership here in Los Angeles, and we spoke about issues of the leadership in Israel. And we spoke about issues of foreign pressure on Israel, foreign pressure that comes from this country too. And people are very frustrated. The chutzpah of Obama or other international leaders to intervene and tell Israel what Israel should do. That's the truth. That's chutzpah. But that's only one side of the coin. The other side is the ability, the acceptance of part of our leadership in Israel to hear what the nations have to tell us. We have not yet grasped the greatness of our own independence. So what we're going to do tonight is I'm going first of all to tell you who I am, and I'll tell you who I represent. I represent the Shomron. I'll tell you what the Shomron is about, the settlements, the West Bank. What are the issues that we're facing? Try to understand the issues that we hear about in the news. What's the meaning of settlement freeze? The settlement freeze the settlements. What's the issue, the demand to stop natural growth in the settlements? What does that mean? I'm going to say I'll make an outrageous statement, but it's very truthful. The only country in the world that international leaders from Western countries can feel legitimately to suggest ethnic cleansing is in Israel. The only place in the world where the President of the United States can get up and say, in other words, the same meaning, cleanse that area of a certain people, which means ethnic cleansing. Anywhere else in the world where that's done, there's an outcry. But here it's accepted. So I think that the slogan of this organization, the slogan of the children of the Jewish Holocaust survivors working to ensure that never again remains more than a mere slogan, is very relevant, very, very relevant to what we're speaking about today. Hopefully the video equipment will be set up and we'll be able to show a video that has to do with very important issues in the area that I come from. And after I make these statements, we'll see the video, and then we'll have some questions and answers about the topics that I brought up and about the video. So to start off with, who am I? My name is David Ha'ivri. I live in Kfar Tapuach, in the Shomron. I gave out a newsletter that we published. There's a map on one of the inner pages that has the names of all of the communities in the Shomron Regional Council. You'll see there on one of the southernmost communities is Kfar Tapuach. That's where I live. I'm married to my wife Mari. We have 8 children. Steve has mentioned that. My oldest daughter is nearly 20 years old. And our baby is nearly 1 year old. We have 2 boys and 6 girls. I was privileged to make Aliyah. I was born in this country. I was born in New York. And I made Aliyah as a child with my parents. My parents decided to move up to the land of Israel. And that was one of the greatest things that my parents did for me. After bringing me into this world, they brought me to the land of Israel. And I grew up in Israel. I went to high school, served in the army, married my wife, Mari, studied in yeshiva, and we settled down in Kfar Tapuach, where we have a home, where we have some olive trees, where we have an extended family. My wife has 10 siblings, and half of her siblings live in our community with their children. Her parents also came to live in our community. My mother-in-law, who came to live in our community as a result of a family tragedy. My mother-in-law has over 40 grandchildren who live in our community. And she has other grandchildren as well who live in communities nearby and in the family's moshav in Kfar Zeitim.
Did you have no babysitting?
Children are a blessing. So So here, we came out to Kfar Tapuach as a young couple about 20 years ago, and we built a home, and we expanded our family. Like many other families in our community, the community of Kfar Tapuach was established over 30 years ago. Many of the families, many of the young couples in our community are kids who grew up in our community. The head of our local council, of the town council in Kfar Tapuach, Doron Hillel, was born in our community. His parents settled in Kfar Tapuach 30 years ago, and he was born there, and he went to school, grew up there, went to the army, was in the professional army, was an officer, met his wife in a nearby community in Kedumim, and they decided that they wanted to make their home in the community that they grew up in, to be near their family, to be near their parents. There are 3 generations in Kfar Tapuach and in many other communities in our area. The communities that I'm talking about are popularly called in the news settlements. Our communities, because they are located in areas that were liberated by the Israeli Defense Force in 1967, these areas, Judea and Samaria, that is popularly called the West Bank. The West Bank of what? Does anyone know? The West Bank of the Jordan River. A river has a West Bank, it has an East Bank, and there's a Jordan River. But the Jordan River has been forgotten from the West Bank, as if the West Bank is an entity within itself.
All Israel is West Bank.
All of the state of Israel is the West Bank. Oh, that's right. There are 2 banks of the Jordan River. There's a song. Zev Jabotinsky wrote a song, Shtei Gadot LaYarden. And then he said, Zu Shelanu, Vezu Gam Ken. He said, both banks, Zev Jabotinsky, the founder of the Beitar movement, wrote a song. There are 2 banks to the Jordan River, and he said both banks of the Jordan River belong to the Jewish people. And he made his statement not as a religious Jew, because he was not, but as a nationalist Jew, and he relied on a promise from the British Empire to the Jewish people to establish a Jewish homeland in the area, in the Palestine Mandate, in the area that was controlled by the British from the First World War. The British agreed, promised to give that over to the Jewish people. And that was Zev Jabotinsky's statement. Both sides of the Jordan River belong to the Jewish people. That's the symbol, the icon of the Beitar movement is a map of the land of Israel, of the British Mandate, of both sides of the Jordan River. And then, of course, the British at some point reneged on their promise and established the kingdom of Transjordan, east of the Jordan River. Just a brief, excuse me for the brief history I'm sure you're familiar with. The War of Independence of the State of Israel was a result of the neighboring Arab countries not accepting the UN partition plan. The UN had suggested to establish 2 countries on the west side of the Jordan River, a country for Arabs and a country for Jews. The Arabs did not accept that plan. Ironically, the Jews did accept the plan, but the Arabs didn't accept it. The Arabs said, no, we will push the Jews into the sea. There will be no Jewish state west of the Jordan River. As a result of the War of Independence in 1948, Israel took control of many areas that were not originally drawn out for the State of Israel by the UN. The partition plan was lost. In that war, Transjordan, the kingdom of Transjordan, took possession of the West Bank. That is when the term the West Bank became to be. Because Transjordan means the east of the Jordan, the kingdom on the east of the Jordan occupied the West Bank. Jordan occupied the West Bank for 19 years. It's important to point that out, because when we hear in the news, and they go over it again and again, to the occupied territories, as if Israel is occupying territories that previously belonged to the Palestinians, it's just a simple outright lie. There never was a Palestinian state. There never was a Palestinian nation. There never was a Palestinian prince. There was never a Palestinian king. One of the founders of the Palestinian people, Hajj Amin Husseini, was a Nazi, spent the years of the war in Berlin, broadcasting in Arabic to the Arabic world the message of Adolf Hitler. He was one of the founders of the Palestinian national movement. There's an equation there. In 1948, the Jordanians took possession, occupied the West Bank, and the Egyptians occupied Gaza Strip. Over 19 years, between 1948 and 1967, 19 years while Jordan occupied the West Bank and Egypt occupied Gaza, neither of those countries made any effort to establish a Palestinian state. Those Arab countries that controlled those areas did not allow the so-called Palestinian people independence. And the so-called Palestinian people did not demand that Jordan and Egypt allow them independence. There are many lies that evolve in these popular terms. Sometimes there are spokesmen for the Palestinians or for the peace movements, the leftist movements, that say that there's an apartheid wall, there's apartheid roads in Israel or in the West Bank. But that again is a lie. Well, there are areas that Jews are not allowed to enter in the West Bank. There are no areas that Arabs are not allowed to enter. There are roads in the West Bank that Jews are not allowed to drive on. Steve visited us in the Shomron a number of times. There are roads in the Shomron. There are roads in Jerusalem, in the northern Jerusalem. There are roads that have a big red sign at the entrance to the road, and it says, no entrance to Israelis. Israelis mean no entrance to Jews. Jews are not permitted to pass through those roads. I'm going to speak about Joseph's tomb in Shechem, Nablus. The Arabs call this holy city of Shechem Nablus. Joseph, the son of Jacob, was buried in Shechem. That's recorded in the Bible. And it's been known through history. Jews are not allowed to enter Shechem. Jews are not allowed to access. Although, in the Oslo agreement that the Palestinians and the Israelis agreed on and signed, they agreed that Jews would have free access to the holy places that are given over to the Palestinians. They agreed that the Jewish yeshiva, the house of learning, at Joseph's tomb would continue to operate. But in September 2000, the Palestinians rioted in Shechem. They took weapons that were given to them by the Israelis in order to administer a strong police force. They used those weapons to kill an Israeli soldier. They took over Joseph's tomb. They burnt down the holy place of the burial of Joseph. 3,000 years. That site was not desecrated. Through the history of the land of Israel, armies came and armies went, and Joseph's tomb was not touched, was not hurt. And throughout history, there are records of Jews visiting and passing through on their way to Jerusalem, stopping at Joseph's tomb and praying there by the side of this holy man, Yosef HaTzadik, Tzadik Yesod Olam. But today, under the rule of the Palestinian Authority, Jews are not allowed to enter Shechem. It's not safe. Jews cannot be protected. Isn't it terrible that we need to to consider this slogan, never again, should be more than a mere slogan. In Israel, Jews are not allowed to pass through. And in the news, they tell us that there's an apartheid in Israel, that there are roads that only Jews use. That's just a lie. I've come here this evening on behalf of the Shomron Regional office. The Shomron Regional office is a branch of the Shomron Regional Council. The Shomron Regional Council is a district. It's like a county. It's a municipality that represents 40 different Jewish communities in the Shomron area. The Shomron area, I gave out the newsletter, and there's a map to give you some bearing of where the Shomron is, where our communities are. Our district, the Shomron Regional Council, is the largest regional council in the state of Israel. In size, the size of our area is 11% of the entire size of the state of Israel. That's the largest regional council in Israel. Throughout the country there are regional councils that unite smaller communities. Larger communities, cities like Haifa and Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, have the city hall. They have the municipality, the local municipality. And even smaller towns like Arad and Dimona and Ma'alot and Ariel have an Iriyah. They have their local municipality. But smaller communities like my town, Kfar Tapuach, in Kfar Tapuach there are 160 families. And throughout the Shomron there are 40 communities. Some of them are larger, 500 families, 800 families, and some of them are smaller, 20 families. Together we're united in the Shomron Regional Council that services our communities. It gives our residents services like school buses and schools. We have 10 elementary schools in our region. We have 900 bus lines, school bus lines every day. 900 school bus lines. Consider that these small communities, you need to send kids out to elementary school and to high school and to special needs and back and forth, and there are some who go to Petach Tikva and some to Jerusalem. So one of the services we give is the bus lines for our school services. In 2005, 4 years ago, in the summer of 2005, the Israeli government carried out the disengagement from Gaza and the north of the Shomron. The disengagement is a nice word for ethnic cleansing. Jewish residents of communities throughout Gush Katif in Gaza were removed from their homes because they're Jewish and because the Palestinians refused to agree for Jews to live in their homes. There are towns, it should be known and stated, there are towns in Gaza, in Gush Katif, that are on lands that were purchased by Jews before the establishment of the State of Israel. There are areas there, Kfar Darom was a community in Gaza, a Jewish community in Gaza, that was overtaken by the Egyptians in the War of Independence. It's privately owned land. Jewish community was re-established there after 1967, after the Six-Day War. And Jews were removed from their homes in 2005. Forcefully. Were taken out by the Israeli army. And the world was silent. And for the most part, the Jewish community was silent. And today, in 2009, there's an open demand by the President of the United States to stop Jewish growth in these areas, in Yehuda and Shomron. I think it's outrageous. I think to say you cannot expand your family because you're Jewish. You cannot live here because you're Jewish. Could you imagine here in California, you can't live here because you're black, you can't live here because you're Mexican, you can't live here because you're Jewish? But to say so about Jews in the Shomron, legitimate. To say, my daughter is 20 years old. Sometime soon she'll want to be married. A young couple comes and they say, we'd like to live near our family. President Obama says, no, you can't do that. That's outrageous.
But the Arabs can live any place.
The Arabs can live anywhere? Sure. Could you imagine? Could you imagine if I came here today and I said, we need to get, in order to have peace in the Middle East, what we need to do is to bring in buses and get all of the Arabs on buses, all of the Arabs in Israel, all of the Arabs in the West Bank, get them on buses and send them to Saudi Arabia. Then I would be branded a racist. Then I would be branded a racist. But to say so about Jews is legitimate. So the issues that we're discussing are the right of the Jewish people to Yehuda and Shomron, up against a demand to take away that right. We hear about rights of Palestinians, but Palestinians, we don't even know who they are, where they began, where their rights come from. The essence of Zionism, the essence of the return to the land of Israel, is the foundation is our heritage. I want to tell you a personal account. My son Hever had his bar mitzvah a few weeks ago. By the way, when Hever was born, and his older brother Yair Maccabi, when they were born, on the 8th day, we took them for the Brit Milah, for the bris, to Joseph's tomb, to Kever Yosef, which is about 10 minutes away from our home. That was before the peace broke out. Before there was peace, Jews could enter Shechem freely. Get into your car, call up the mohel, say, let's go to Shechem, get some catering. You go to Kever Yosef, to Joseph's tomb. How symbolic. The Brit Milah at Ir HaBrit, the city of the covenant, Shechem, at the burial place of the Tzaddik Yosod Olam, Yosef HaTzaddik. And that was before there was peace. They say that if you ran peace, like a movie in reverse, say you took the peace process and you ran it like a movie in reverse, it would start off with rockets being fired into our cities, and it would end with a handshake on the White House lawn. The peace process in reverse. Before there was peace. Anyway, Hever, my son, had a bar mitzvah a few weeks ago, and we decided that instead of having a big dinner and a celebration and a hall and a band, to do something more symbolic, more educational, more meaningful. And we took Hever and his friends on a hike to Masada. We went and camped out on the side of the road. No hotels, no tents. We just drove down into the Judean desert by the Yam HaMelach. We stopped, by the way, at Yam HaMelach, at En Gedi, and we went and emerged in the Dead Sea. I don't know how many of you have done that. And I haven't done that in many years. It was an opportunity to go in, and I really had a good time. I went into the Dead Sea, and you know, it's the salt is so thick that it's hard to emerge. You float. It's difficult to, and I had a good time in the water, and I got out of the water, and I as I'm walking out of the water, I remembered that I had put my car keys in my pocket. So here I am, all wet with just my shorts and no shirt, and all of our food was in the car, and my phone was in the car, and everything was in the car. Anyway, at some point we succeeded in getting on our way. After a couple of hours, we figured out how to get out of that situation. And we drove down to Masada, and we camped out on the side of the road. We made a fire and cooked some things and slept there. And we got up very early in the morning. The idea was to get up early in the morning because it's very, very hot there. And it was in June, towards the summer. There are moshavim around Yam HaMelech that have tents that they rent out for people for camping. And it turned out that they're closed over the 3 summer months, June, July, and August. They don't even open because it's so hot that people don't come down there during those months. So we just slept there on the side of the road, and we got up very early in order to walk up the snake path. The snake path is the original path that the people who were on Masada used to access Masada. Today, when you visit Masada, the majority of the people, I assume that the majority of the people who visit Masada come either on the cable car from the same side. The cable car comes, it's on the east side of Masada, and it goes over the snake path, takes people right up. And the other people come from the west side of Masada through Arad. There's a road, it's a dead-end road. You come from Arad up to Masada. The road only leads you to Masada because there's a valley in between and the road stops. So you can't drive from Arad all the way to the Dead Sea. So people drive there and then they walk up the ramp. There's a ramp on the west side of Masada. The ramp on the west side of Masada was built by the Romans who conquered Masada. So it turns out that the majority of the people who visit Masada, if they walk up, they're walking up with the courtesy of the Romans who conquered that site. But we walked up the snake path. The snake path, the elevation from the beginning of the hike up to the top of the mountain is 350 meters high. 350 meters high is the height of a building 120 stories high. So you're walking up the side of a mountain, it's very steep, and it's like walking up 120 stories. And it's very hot there. So our idea was to start very early in the morning, before sunbreak. We started about 5:30. And it takes about 45 minutes to get up. And by halfway up, it's already pretty hot. And while I'm walking up, with these kids in front of me, they were more of a run, and I'm pushing up, and it's an effort. It's an effort to get up there. And I'm thinking about the people who were there, the Zealots, the Jews who fought the Romans. They did not have the ramp, and they didn't have the cable car. In order to get up there, they needed to walk up that 120 stories in the heat. And I'm thinking about the message of these people. I'm thinking about Masada. Very often when we hear the term Masada, it's more about the end of the story of the people, the fighters at Masada who decided to commit suicide, to die as free men, to die as free Jews, to die as free Jews on a sovereign land of the Jewish people, and not fall into slavery in the hands of the imperialist Romans. And that's the strong known message of Masada. So when somebody says Masada, usually that's the concept that people think about. 960 people committed suicide to die as free men. But as I'm walking up the side of Masada, I was thinking about other messages, other points. There's so much more of the message of the people who were there at Masada, aside for the end. And the end, by the way, is not the climax of the story. The collective suicide of 960 people on Masada is not the climax of the story. The climax of that story is the establishment of the State of Israel. That's the climax of the story. The climax of the story is walking up the side of the mountain with a bunch of 13-year-old boys, speaking in Hebrew, kids who go to school in the land of Israel, who are sabras. And I was thinking, walking up, that just 2-3 weeks previous to that, President Obama came to Cairo to make his address to the Muslim world. And in his address, he was very thoughtful of the Jewish people. If you ask him, and if you ask the majority of the Jewish people, I don't know about the people in this room, but the people who voted, the majority of the people who, the people who were represented by the Jewish leaders who met with Obama this week. Obama was speaking to them. And he said to the Arab world, he said, we must acknowledge the right of the Jewish people to have a state. Thank you. And then he said that the Jewish people were persecuted in Europe by the Nazis. And he said, and tomorrow I'm going to the camps where they were killed. So they deserve a state. And I'm not sure if you heard these statements, or if you follow the statements, but I know that in Israel, many people in Israel were offended by those statements. Many people said, what does he mean? We deserve a state because we were murdered by the Nazis in Europe? That's our right to a state? And by the way, if that is our right to a state, then, and what's that? The Nazi in Iran, Ahmadinejad. What did he say? He was interviewed on 60 Minutes by Mike Wallace, if I'm not mistaken. And he said he's a Holocaust denier. He says there was no Holocaust. But he said to Mike Wallace, he said, but let's just assume that there was a Holocaust. That gives them the right to have a state. And if it does give them a right to have a state, why in Palestine? Let them have a state in Germany. If President Obama, if our right to a state is because the Nazis persecuted us in Europe, then we can have a state in Uganda, we can have a state in Texas, we can have a state in Germany. Why in Israel? So walking up Masada, I'm thinking about President Obama's address to the Muslim world in Cairo. And it dawned on me that we're to blame. We are to blame. Why are we to blame? I'll tell you why. Because every VIP who comes to Israel, be it the Pope, or a president, or a candidate to presidency, or whoever comes to Israel, is taken by the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Ministry. They pick him up in the limousine, and they take him right over to Yad Vashem, and they give him a kippah, and he stands and says a little prayer, and he makes a statement that he was very moved and he feels so terrible about what happened. And then they take him to the Kotel, and he scribbles a note and sticks it in the wall. And then they take him to the Knesset, and he stands in front of all of our elected officials, and he tells them that he was at Yad Vashem, and he feels so sorry and so terrible about what happened, and that he went to the Kotel and he stuck a note, and that's it. That's the VIP tour of Israel. If that's the tour that we give them, then it's not shocking that they identify our right to the state with the Holocaust. The Holocaust was a wake-up call to the Jewish people to return. It was a wake-up call, calling on us to return to our land. Our land, since the time of our exile, our forced exile by the Romans in 73 at Masada, from that time until the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948, there was never, ever any independent country in the land of Israel ruled by any other nation. There was never any independent country in the West Bank. The only people in the world who have a true claim, a true legal claim to the land in the West Bank, and I don't care if you call it the West Bank, if you call it Palestine, whatever you want to call it. The only people who have a legal claim to that land are the Jewish people. We were forced off of that land. That's the message of the Masada. The message of Masada is that our people, our warriors, fought and died fighting for the independence of our land. The survivors of that Holocaust in 73, in the year 70, was a terrible, terrible Holocaust in the land of Israel. Many, 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 many died there. And those who survived were chained and marched off into slavery. The people of Israel in the year 70 and 73 did not make Yeridah. They did not leave Israel because of financial difficulties. They did not leave Israel for a year or two to check out.
They couldn't go to America.
They couldn't go to America, Nachon. And they didn't want to go to America. They wanted... Think of the people in Masada. You know how uncomfortable it is there in the middle of the desert? The people who were there were not native desert people. They came from Jerusalem. Jerusalem was conquered. And they went to Masada because on that small area, 960 people. 960 people is about the size of the town that I live in. They had independence. So, the thought that occurred to me walking up the elevation of Masada was that the message that we need to relay to our VIPs and to our children and to ourselves is walking up that mountain and understanding the message that we were forced off of our land, and understanding that our history, our right to the land of Israel starts there, not in the Holocaust. For 2,000 years, the Jews spread out amongst the nations in every different exile in Yemen and in Poland and in America and in India and in China. Every place in the world where Jews were, Jews faced Jerusalem and prayed to return. Not only to Jerusalem, to Shechem, to Hebron, to Beit El, to Beit Lechem. If you notice on the map that I gave you, the town of Kfar Tapuach, if you look on a road map of the state of Israel, there are no road numbers on my map. The road that cuts from Shechem, the road is numbered 60. It's like the backbone of the land of Israel. That's the historical highway of the Bible. If you read the story of the Bible, if you read about Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, you'll see that every location that they stopped at, every location that's mentioned in the Bible, in Israel, is on that road. Avraham Avinu, when he entered the land of Israel, the first place that he reached was Elon Moreh, Shechem. He came to Shechem. He came to Elon Moreh. Shiloh, Beit El, Jerusalem, Bethlehem, Hebron, and Beersheba are all on that road. That is the foundation of our right to the land of Israel. If we don't have a right to the West Bank, then we don't have a right to the land of Israel. The Arabs understand that. Don't be fooled. The peace process is a piece-by-piece process. Their goal is to eliminate the Jewish state. They don't want Jews in Israel. They didn't want Jews in Israel in 1948 when they were granted a partition plan, and they don't want Jews now. The only difference is that they're smarter now and we're dumber now. Because we agree to this and we negotiate. You know, every negotiation that the state of Israel has held with the Palestinians over the past few years, our positions become worse and worse for us. I'm going to show you a film now about the issue of Joseph's tomb, which is near to our heart and near to our location. Joseph's tomb is 10 minutes north of my home. It's a site where a yeshiva flourished for 25 years and was destroyed as a result of the peace process. Our leadership in the Shomron are very active trying to restore Joseph's tomb. I had in the framework of my position in the Shomron Liaison office, I interact with international media. I bring out journalists to visit our communities. And I had a journalist from the New York Times. I brought her on the Hilltop tour. Hilltops is another one of the issues that are very hot in the news. The Hilltops. I took her to see communities in the Shomron area, to see the organic farming. By the way, the organic farming in our region, in the Shomron, is the capital of organic farming in Israel. The largest producer of organic eggs in Israel is located in Itamar, in an incredible, beautiful ranch. Steve was there. You're all invited. Call me when you come to Israel. I'll take you out. You'll see things you don't believe. We have producers of organic wines, growing wines where Jews historically grew wines. The prophet says, "Oditu kramim b'harei Shomron." The prophet prophesies to the Jews who were being marched out into slavery, seeing their homes burnt and their warriors killed. The prophet said to them, Jews will return to the Shomron and plant vineyards. And today Jews are in the Shomron planting vineyards and producing wines. And there's a story here in the newsletter about Erez Ben Saadon, who produced wines. Year after year he gets prizes because of the excellence of the wine that he produces. And when you visit the Shomron, you can see carved in the stone the ancient grape presses, the ancient Jewish industry of wines. I took this journalist, Isabel Kushner from the New York Times, on a tour of the Hilltops. And she's not a supporter. Personally, she doesn't support what we're doing. But she was amazed. And I took her at the end of the tour to a site that we call Mitzpeh Yosef, the Yosef lookout point, on Har Grizim, on Mount Grizim, overlooking the city of Shechem. Jews can overlook Joseph's tomb. Before 1967, when Kever Rachel, when Rachel's tomb was under Jordanian control and Jews could not reach that site, Jews would go to Ramat Rachel, would go to the kibbutz south of Jerusalem, and look in the direction of Beit Lechem. They couldn't really see it, but Jews would look in that direction and say Tehillim, pray, as if they were visiting Rachel's tomb, Rachel's tomb. And today we have a similar situation in Shechem. Jews are not allowed to enter, but we can reach the lookout point on Har Grizim and look down and see Joseph's tomb. So I took Isabel to see that at the end of the tour, and she said, she made a very interesting observation. She said to me, you know that your communities here in the Shomron, you see yourselves as the guardians of Joseph's tomb. She said to me, you are here because of Joseph's tomb. And the truth is that I hadn't thought of that perception myself. There's a lot of truth in that. And coming from the outside, her perception of the situation is very, very correct. We are there because of our history, because of the signs and the carvings in the stones. And now we are back. I'm going to turn on the video, and after the video we'll have some questions and answers.
Jerusalem, Chol HaMoed Sukkot, the year 2008. It's near midnight as tens of Jews are preparing for a long ride. In the meantime, thousands of Jews from all over the country get ready to make their way in a bus similar to this. They are all going to Joseph's tomb in Shechem. Why? What is everyone looking for in Joseph's tomb? And in the middle of the night? What is so special about Joseph's tomb? Joseph's tomb is mentioned in the Bible, both in the Chumash and the prophets. And Yaakov came to Shalem, a city of Shechem, which is in the land of Canaan. And he bought the piece of land on which he spread his tent at the hand of the children of Hamor, Shechem's father, for 100 pieces of money. And the bones of Yosef, which the children of Israel brought up out of Egypt, they buried in Shechem, in a section of ground which Yaakov bought from the sons of Hamor, the father of Shechem, for 100 pieces of money. And they became the inheritance of the children of Yosef. The tradition as to the location of Joseph's tomb has been preserved and passed down over the years. The ancient Madabar map from the 7th century mentions Joseph's tomb near Shechem. 600 years later, a Jewish traveler writes, "And from there I went to Shechem and saw the gravesite of the righteous Joseph, son of Jacob, which was situated between two marble pillars, one at its head and one at its feet." Throughout all of history, Jews made the pilgrimage to the gravesite of Yosef HaTzadik, Joseph the Righteous One, to pray and pour out their supplications to God. They are attracted to the figure of Joseph because of his noble and righteous character, as mentioned in the Bible. For decades, the yeshiva Od Yosef Chai, located near Joseph's tomb in the city of Shechem, was a place where people of all ages came to pray and engage in deep study of the Torah. In addition to the numerous visitors to the holy site, there existed a permanent yeshiva of Torah scholars, studying Torah daily with great self-sacrifice. But during the Second Intifada in September 2000, on the second day of Rosh Hashanah, Joseph's tomb was attacked by Palestinians. One of the soldiers defending the site was injured and killed. In the aftermath of the attack, the Palestinians take control of the area from the IDF, promising to honor the sanctity of the site. But the moment the IDF withdraws from the area, Joseph's tomb is desecrated. Torah scrolls are burned. The entire area ransacked and vandalized. For several years after that, Jews are not permitted to visit Joseph's tomb.
When I look down to Kever Yosef, I feel that we've sold our brother for a second time.
לראות את המקום בחורבנו, שמם, הרוס, שרוף, נטוץ, אין ספק שזו תחושה קשה.
We see what a farce that was. This was supposed to be one of the fundamental things, that they are going to protect us, something that I never believed was going to happen, and something that the whole world sees has not happened.
It is obvious that the Palestinian Authority has not complied with the stipulations that they provide free and unfettered access to all Jewish holy sites.
The Jewish people have a right to the land of Israel. They have a right to their holy places.
Today, through great efforts, Jews are returning to Joseph's tomb. The government is giving permission for only one visit a month, in the middle of the night, with a massive army escort, and for only a few thousand Jews each time. On the nights in which Jews are allowed to visit, there is great excitement and anticipation. Tens of buses from all over Israel are filled with Jews who come to pour out their hearts and bask in the holiness of the righteous Yosef. It is an atmosphere of spiritual elevation and sanctity.
I hadn't been aware of before of the power of Yosef. It was almost like a magnetic draw for people, and I'm not sure many of them could even explain it themselves.
Kever Yosef is not only holy, but it's part of our heart and part of our soul and part of who we are.
He was a personality who could be the viceroy, second only to the pharaoh in Egypt, but yet still maintain his Masorah, still maintain his tradition and his Jewish identity. That's why he is so important to us, to the Jewish people.
יש לנו רשימות שאנשים שמחכים לפעמים שנה ויותר, ללא שום הגזמה, שנה ויותר על מנת להיכנס למקום.
It's inspiring to see the thousands of people who are coming out in the middle of the night to take part in this event. And this brings us further to our ultimate goal of re-establishing Kever Yosef. And I'm sure that we will reach that goal.
The variety of different kinds of people who came, I think it's impossible to generalize and label them as anything, because I mean, you had the grandmothers from Ra'anana and Hasidim from Bnei Brak, and people who actually in normal life would probably not have that much in common with each other.
By continuing to visit Kever Yosef, we're showing the government and our people and our kids how important it is to maintain our rights and our connections with our heritage in this country.
שברו, ניצו, שרפו את הקבר, ולכאורה כבר אין לו תקומה. אבל כמו עם ישראל, גם במצב כזה, הוא מוצא את הכוחות, מתרומם ובונה את הכל מחדש. ברוך אתה, אדוני, אלוהינו מלך העולם, שעשה ניסים לאבותינו, בימים ההם בזמן הזה.
After great effort, a small flickering light was ignited on Hanukkah of 2008. A team of Jewish workers accompanied by the IDF entered Shechem and rebuilt Joseph's tomb. The restoration is a small part in an overall effort to return Jewish sovereignty and dignity to the historical site.
פעם ראשונה שהתפנים בהתחלה להיות כלפי מעלה, ובעזרת השם הגאולה פה מתחילה.
זה לא משהו גדול, סך הכל שמו מלט, אבל זה כל כך, זה פשוט בעיניי, זה שינוי אווירה, שינוי תפיסה. אנחנו חוזרים ליוסף.
אנחנו מצפים שנחזור למקום הזה כמו שהוא היה בתפארתו.
We intend to come in and rebuild the roof of the building and to finish renovating the entire building and to continue and demand the regular access for Jews to be able to enter Kever Yosef every day.
Without that access to our holy sites, to our legacy, we have no future.
Thank God there are people who care, and all of the Jewish people need to support the efforts. They need to be involved.
Joseph's tomb, Kever Yosef, the gravesite of one of our nation's forefathers, is again becoming a place where multitudes of Jews visit and pray. In a continuous chain, generation after generation of Jews continue the tradition of visiting their patriarch to pray for themselves, for their land, and for their nation. Today, there is an opportunity to strengthen our Jewish hold on the site. Ensuring that this site remains in Jewish hands is fulfilling the legacy of our Holy Father, Yosef HaTzadik.
The accusation is a means of propaganda, is demeaning people, and is untrue. The people who live in Yehuda and Shomron are dedicated Jews. Steve's question.
The question was this: the media portrays the people who live in the territories, Judea and Samaria, as a bunch of religious fanatics who are obstacles to peace. My question is, what type of people live there, And how would he answer the accusation that they're obstacles to peace?
But by the way, a little known fact, the area that I live in, the Shomron Regional Council, is made up of nearly 50% religious and 50% non-religious residents. Although the media likes to focus in on people who seem more religious and show us as the settlers, the settler community in the Shomron is an image of the Israeli society in a whole. We have people of all different walks of life in Israel live in the Shomron. And people who are dedicated to the ideals of Zionism, who love the land of Israel. The media uses the demeaning in order to demote our popularity. As I stated in my speech, from the time of the Jewish exile in 73 up until 1948, with 2,000 years, there was no other people who established an independent country in areas. The so-called Palestinians have no history. They're not a people who at one point had a nation, had their own country, had their own culture. They're people who drifted in and out throughout history, and the abundance of the so-called Palestinian people came in as a result of Zionism, as a result of the Jews coming to Israel over the past 100 years and establishing industry and establishing agriculture and causing places for work and income. Peoples from neighboring countries emigrated to Israel. Census of the land of Israel from 50 years ago and 70 years ago and 100 years ago will show that before the movement of return of Jews to the land of Israel, the general population in the land of Israel, throughout the land of Israel, was very small. The history of Zionism teaches us, if we learn anything about the pioneers who started out 180 years ago and 70 years ago, drying up the swamps in the land of Israel. The land of Israel was very difficult. There was malaria, there were swamps, there was not any real source of income. By the way, in the areas of Judea and Samaria, the areas of the so-called occupation, up until 1967, until the Israelis came in, the Palestinians, the so-called Palestinians who lived there, were not permitted to build. Under Jordanian occupation, the Jordanians did not allow the Arabs in those areas to build homes. They lived in huts. When the Israelis came in 1967, the Arabs who were there suffered from malnutrition, did not have homes, and because of the Israeli occupation or control of those areas, the Arabs in those areas have flourished. Their standard of living in Judea and Samaria, in the West Bank, is higher than the standard of living of Arabs, of their parallels in surrounding countries. I have two responses to that. One is the Jewish leadership at that time made a mistake agreeing to that. But in any case, in an agreement there are two sides. The Arabs did not accept that agreement. So the Israelis made a mistake, and the Arabs also made a mistake. Their mistake was not to accept it. They should have taken the money and run. But they didn't accept it at that time. They thought they were smarter and stronger. They said, we'll wipe out the Jewish state and we'll put an end to it. So they went to war with Israel, and they brought an end to the partition plan. There's no suggestion today by anyone to re-accept the 1947 partition plan. The 1947 partition plan would leave all of the Galil as part of an Arab state, and the Israeli government is not negotiating that. So there's no talk about the partition plan. There's just a talk about a new entity that has never existed up until now of establishing a Palestinian state. I published a book a few years ago called Reclaiming the Temple Mount. And in my book, Reclaiming the Temple Mount, I give an overview of the history of the Temple Mount throughout the ages, and a overview in history of the Jewish organizations that are involved in the issue of the Temple Mount. Temple Mount is a very, very delicate issue. That area, too, was under Jordanian control up until 1967. the Moshe Dayan and Mota Gor. There's the famous Israeli saying quoted by the quote of Mota Gor in the war, the 6-day war, Har Habayit b'yadenu. There's a statement, the Temple Mount is in our hands, which is a very nationalist statement in Israel. People are moved by that statement. It's like the Pledge of Allegiance. The Mota Gor is quoted capturing the Temple Mount, and as a secular general of the Israeli army, not a person with a religious background or understanding, but he felt the importance, and the Israelis feel the importance of that statement. The Temple Mount is the essence, is the center of the whole concept of Zionism. The rebuilding Jerusalem. When we say next year in Jerusalem, the Yerushalayim Abnuya, Yerushalayim that we're talking about, that the meaning of Jerusalem is the temple. The temple. Avraham Stern, the visionary of the Jewish state, the founder of the Lehi, the Freedom Fighters for Israel, in his 13 points of a vision of the rebirth of the Jewish state and nation, set down rebuilding the temple as a symbol of the refounding of the Jewish nation, of the Jewish state.
Is it going to happen?
Is it going to happen? If a speaker stood here 100 years ago and you asked, is a Jewish state going to happen? Could it be said yes? If we return to the land of Israel, Bezrat Hashem, when the time comes, we will rebuild the temple. Eric, the organization that I represent, the Shomron Regional office, was established by the mayor of the Shomron Regional Council, Shomron Masika, who was elected to office a year and a half ago. He was elected as part of a process of change of leadership and change of vision within our movement, within the settler enterprise. Gershon was elected. The Shomron Regional Council is the municipality for 40 communities in our area. We hold elections through the Israeli Ministry of Interior, like any other municipality in the country. A year and a half ago, the elections in the municipalities are once every 5 years. We had general elections. There were 6 candidates. Towards the end of the run, 3 of the other candidates joined Gershon's team, and Gershon won the elections in a landslide. He was supported by the majority of our communities, and I see that as part of a change of direction by the residents of our communities, understanding that our previous leadership was lacking, and the leadership that he offered is a different type of leadership, which is expressed in many different areas. But one of the points of vision that Gershon Masika brought in, he was in the film, by the way. Gershon foresaw establishing the Shomron Regional office, an office that would outreach to communities in the world, to Jewish and Christian and friends of Israel, to interact with the media and so forth. We're an organization in the stages of establishing itself. One of the things that we're working on doing is empowering spokesmen and spokespeople for our communities. For instance, we are within the next few weeks opening up a Dale Carnegie course in English for representatives of our different communities, in order to teach people the skills of speaking publicly in English. And those people will be the people that you will be seeing in the media, because journalists who interact with our communities through our office will be connected with those people. So when they call me up and they say, we'd like to visit a hilltop community, I will bring them and introduce them to a person who can express himself. And when they want to see this, that, or the other community, those are the people who will be speaking with them. And Be'ezrat Hashem, we will be able to empower more people and send out more representatives. Aside from that, we're working very closely now with the Israeli Ministry of Hasbara. Yuri Edelstein, who is a friend of our communities, and I met with his people just before I came out here. And we're also working on ways to, together with the State of Israel, send out more people from our communities to speak here. Anyone here, including yourself, who have contacts in UCLA or in other venues, who would like to invite our speakers to come out, please contact me after this event, and we'll work that out. By the way, I don't know if you've received envelopes and cards that I had passed out here. The cards are meant for, if you have a business card, that's fine, and if you don't, please fill out the card with your information so I can add you to our list, our update list on the email, or send you printed editions of our newsletter. The envelopes are meant for a donation. Shuva Israel is a non-for-profit American organization that we administer for the development of our communities and for programs that we've spoken about for Kever Yosef, for the public relations, and for other developments in our towns. People who are interested in sponsoring larger projects, please contact me and we can discuss different opportunities. Of course, I would appreciate a donation to further our efforts. Recently, I had a speaker from the foreign ministry in Israel speak with our representatives in the Shomron. A fellow who was he was here in the council for a number of years, Ido Aharoni. I don't know if anyone is familiar with him. Ido Aharoni runs a department in the Misrad HaChutz, in the ministry of the foreign ministry in Israel, called the labeling of the state of Israel. And he has conducted research on public relations and labeling of countries. An amazing presentation and amazing information he gave us. In discussions, in conversations with Ido Aharoni, he told me that our movement, the Settler Enterprise, lost the public relations. First of all, they came to the conclusion that the state of Israel has been doing it wrong since the beginning, doing the hasbara. You know, everybody knows that word in Hebrew, hasbara, because the state of Israel put such an effort into hasbara. There are hasbara committees and so forth. The government of Israel invested recently a great amount of money into research and investigating the hasbara. Where did it come from? What is the concept? And they discovered that the concept that they've been using for the past 60, 70, 80 years is wrong. The concept is wrong. And they discovered that the concept was founded on somebody said so. Somebody said this is what we should do. Somebody got up and said, it wasn't based on any research, or somebody said this is what we should do. And that's what they've been doing. And they've been putting all of their efforts in the wrong direction. So Ido told me that the settler movement in the issue of the disengagement copied the concepts of the state of Israel. So our public relations were so bad because we were copying the bad public relation concepts of the state of Israel. Over the years, many of the advocates of Judea and Samaria have used the security argument, have said, if we give over Judea and Samaria to the Arabs, that will endanger the central area of Israel. That will endanger Kfar Saba and Tel Aviv and the airport. The airport will be in range of small rockets. And people have published maps and pictures and drawings of the threat of these small rockets that can be shot into the airport. And that's been the main argument. That's a mistake too. It hasn't worked. It's the truth. And Shderot and Gaza proved that truth, because they're using the areas that Israel disengaged from. Israel gave those areas over to the Palestinians. Israel and America forced the Palestinians to have democracy. They democratically voted in the Hamas. They established an Islamic country in Gaza. They're using the area, they're using the same places where Jewish homes stood to shoot rockets into Jewish towns on the Israeli side of the border. So that proves that the whole concept, the whole threat of giving over these areas will endanger Kfar Saba and Tel Aviv and the airport. That's the truth. But the hasbara, this propaganda, doesn't convince anyone. It's the truth, but it doesn't convince anyone. The argument should be the true argument. Who said that I'm a good, iconic representative of the idea that we're representing? The idea that we're representing is based on our national right to our national homeland, which is based in a religious right. Whether a person is observant or not observant is not the issue. The issue is that we understand that our national calling to return to the land of Israel is based in those same ideas, is based in who asked me about the Temple Mount, is based in the idea of the Temple Mount, because that's our vision. That's the reason when Motagor, a secular general, reached the Temple Mount, he called out, Harabayit beyadenu, the Temple Mount is in our hands, and Israelis applauded him. Because that's the base. That's our argument. Our argument is Masada. Our argument is our soldiers, is our history. Our argument is God gave us the land. That's our argument. Israeli soldiers are not Nazis. Children who say that are mistaken and should be reprimanded. Should not make statements like that. And recently there was an event that our representative, Chaver Knesset Michael Ben-Ari, was arrested, and a young man made a statement like that, and Ben-Ari came out to the youth and said, do not make those statements. That it is wrong to make those statements. We are the army. The army is us. We serve in the army. Our children serve in the army. It's wrong for the government, by the way, to use the army to dismantle our settlements. Ben-Gurion refused to send out the soldiers to pick oranges. He said, our soldiers are not slaves. They're not Ovdim Shchorim. They're not to be sent out to do anything that's needed to be done. They're there to protect our people. That's the job of the army. The government who sends in the army is making a terrible mistake. But that's besides the point. I think that the Balfour Declaration, like many other points on the way, are important to point out. But that alone doesn't own us the right. The British can say, okay, at one point we agreed and we changed our mind. But there is double standard. There throughout the country, throughout Israel and the West Bank, there are thousands and thousands of illegal, unpermitted, unauthorized buildings by Arabs that are not being administered and not being dealt with. Recently, last week, the police office sent a letter to our municipality, to the mayor of the Shomron, to Gershon Masika, with a list of 11 hilltop communities that have unpermitted buildings that the police intend on coming in and destroying. So they turned to the mayor of our communities and said, you take them down in order to avoid a conflict. But the police are not sending letters like that to Arab mayors of Arab municipalities telling them to take down buildings that were built with no permits. Not only that, but the authorities in Israel are working overtime in order to serve permits to Arab buildings that were built without permits. So there is a double standard in that issue, and that's an issue we're fighting.
I'm going to wrap up the official portion of the meeting, but David will be around to answer questions. I want to urge everybody, he's on the front lines. People like him are on the front lines, standing up for all of us. Whatever we can do to help, whether it's financial, whether it's going to Israel and making sure we go to Judea and Samaria and contacting David, whether it's buying products from those towns which are boycotted, frankly, whether it's writing letters to the editor in the newspapers when their people are attacking the settlements, whether it's lobbying, whatever we can do to support these people, I urge you to do. Again, shockingly, this man is radioactive, and there are people who are afraid to hear him. Okay, and again, and I thank Doris for having the guts to do this.